I remember that horrid day as if it were yesterday. The images and sounds still there, always there, filling my head with a constant reminder of the tragic events that I brought forth. I was a small boy of 7, running in the crisp fall air on my parents' Illinois farm. A modest farm of just 12 acres, passed down by my grandfather to my father. It was now void of the corn that had grown through its cycle. Small and vulnerable in late spring, large and green during summer, and brown and weakening with the approach of fall. My family was poor, meals were small, and cracks in the house large. Summers were hot and winters brutally cold. But fall, oh fall, how beautiful a time. The leaves, with their yellows, oranges, and reds, and the cool evening breezes that lifted the hairs on your head and chilled you straight to the bone. Oh, how I loved fall, at least before that tragic day in November of 1945. Now each year, fall ushers in with it a cloud of darkness that covers my spirit and constantly reminds me of that fateful day. My sister, my sweet sister Jennifer. I never called her Jennifer, though. No one did. She was known only as Jenny. Jenny also loved those fall months, and she loved me, her big brother. I remember our childhood days on the farm vividly, playing on the ragged tire swing, running barefoot through the worn grass in our backyard, and building forts out of soft golden straw in the barn. We were loud, we had fun, and times were great. At least they were, before that day arrived that changed everything. Back to Jenny. Jenny, 2 years younger than me, radiated beautiful innocence with her long, silky blonde hair, light blue eyes, and delicate face that held a smile filled with charm and delight. Jenny was smart, lively, and what I perceived as the object of my parents' attention. All of their attention, it seemed to me. I'm not sure the precise moment or exact details that set the wheels in motion on that cool, clear fall afternoon of November 2nd, 1945, but once things shifted forward, there was nothing that could stop us from arriving at the evil that lay ahead. The event itself and the aftermath still haunt me to this day. I still see images so vivid, both while awake and deep in sleep. It all started while I was raking leaves in the backyard early that Saturday afternoon. I was using a large rake with a long, thin wooden handle that had been worn down through years of use and neglect. At the end of the rake was a strong, yet equally worn piece of rusty metal with a long row of pointy, thin teeth, almost like shark teeth, lined up one after another, just waiting to bite. In fact, in my dreams, shark teeth are often what I see. Using the rake, I worked up a good sweat and felt tired and exhausted despite the rather cool air. I wasn't raking at the command of my parents or for any type of aesthetic appeal, but rather to construct the largest pile of leaves that I could. Ultimately, I just wanted to jump in the pile and have some fun. As I stood to admire my work, I saw Jenny out of the corner of my eye. She was running and then jumping right into the middle of the pile. Jenny laughed and giggled while grabbing handfuls of leaves and throwing them innocently over her head, smiling as they rained down all around her. Although I don't recall exactly what I said to Jenny at that moment, I do remember the extreme anger that boiled within me. My eyes bulged and my fists clenched. I yelled something coarse and bitter, and Jenny turned to me with a look of both shock and sadness. She then ran into the house in tears. A hint of remorse pierced my heart. I attempted to reconstruct the pile while my mind quickly turned those impending feelings of guilt full circle back to my initial emotions of fury and hate. I saw my mother coming out to scold me and knew any display of anger would only get me a date with the wooden spoon that had so often left its mark on my backside. I lowered my head and tried not to listen to my mother's rant. The ill feelings toward my sister continued to build. As my mother finished and made her way back to the house, my mind had already constructed a terrible image, the image that would soon become reality and change all of our lives forever. As I look back now, writing this at an age where the mind wastes little time excusing oneself for past occurrences, but instead begins to accept and atone for one's behavior, I'm finally at a point where I can fully accept the immense dread that I caused. It makes it no easier to live with, however. Actually, It may make it even harder, as the burden of this realization and acceptance has a way of smothering the mind and soul with a heavy blanket of guilt, instead of lifting it away, as I had hoped. But back to November 2nd, 1945. The image I created, so lifelike in my mind, began working its way to reality as soon as I started to again rake up the pile of leaves. If my sister hadn't come back outside so soon, would I have pursued her to complete my plan? I'm not sure, because with every step closer to finishing the task, I found it harder and harder to push away those impending feelings of indecision and guilt. "Randy, that's a huge pile of leaves. Are you going to jump in them?" Jenny said this with so much excitement in her voice, a voice that relayed to me that all had been forgiven for the fear and hurt I had caused her just a moment ago. "Yes, but you're going to jump in first," I said. Her smile brightened up her entire face, and at that moment she really did look as close to an angel as anything I'd ever seen before or since. "Really? You mean it?" She was almost jumping up and down now, trying to contain her excitement. "Go ahead. Just make sure you get a running start." With that said, Jenny made her way across the yard and then yelled, "Is this far enough?" "That's good. Now let's see what you got." As Jenny began to run, my heart beat hard and fast, my head throbbed, and a feeling of both anxiety and angst left me feeling a bit faint. Jenny picked up speed and laughed in a high-pitched tone, which was both creepy and delightful. As she approached the pile, I saw her arms rise in front of her, with her body and legs soon following in a horizontal parade. This is when I realized she was going to dive into the leaves face first. I turned my head, closed my eyes, and at the last moment prayed to a God I had undoubtedly disappointed that my sister would be okay. Before I had a chance to open my eyes, I heard the scream, an animalistic growling screech of pure pain and agony. The scream was awful, something I still hear over and over again in my dreams. As bad as that scream was, though, it wasn't nearly as bad as what was waiting when I opened my eyes. My sister was sitting by the pile of leaves, grasping at her face where two long, menacing spikes had penetrated her head. She jerked forward, back, side to side, all while still swatting at the object protruding from her skin. I froze in horror and saw my mother running from the house, screaming herself in disbelief. Jenny continued to yell, scream, and twitch as my mother pulled the rake free. Coming with it was at least part of my sister's left eye. I could see a gelatinous ooze dripping from the rake with a mixture of blood, lots of blood. My mother ran into the house with my sister in her arms as I continued to sit in the yard, my mind and body frozen in a state of shock and shame while listening to the endless screams of my sister. I would love to conclude this story on a positive note, but so often life is cruel and vicious, and this case is no exception. My sweet sister, Jenny, lost her left eye. She traversed the path of life, often looking for places to escape, places to hide and weep. Others were cruel, but not as cruel as had been her own flesh and blood. Every time I looked at Jenny's face after that fateful day, it brought a feeling of disgust and pain that I have never been able to escape. Not a disgust at the deformities themselves, but of the reminder that I was responsible for those scars and all the dread that followed. I had created a monster. Through the years, I often thought of myself like that of Victor Frankenstein, both of us unleashing a terror as a result of our selfish pursuits. But Frankenstein was fiction, and sometimes real life is worse. Despite the curse I inflicted on Jenny, she held no ill will towards me after that day. Maybe this was because the coward in me never told her, or anyone else, that I had intentionally put the rake under the leaves. Yes, I wanted to hurt Jenny, but only a little, only give her a glimpse into the unhappiness of my world. But as life continued forward, I found that I could not accept Jenny's love. Every glance upon that face, the face I had destroyed, only cut deeper within my already damaged soul. I pushed her away, always, as I had pushed her towards the pile of leaves and away from the splendid life she deserved. Jenny, who had to grow up in a world that no longer accepted her, that teased her and taunted her, had to also endure the pain of a brother that shunned her just the same. These cruelties of life proved to be too much. Like I said, life is often grim and unfair, and this is another example. Jenny decided to take her own life, just 2 days after her 22nd birthday. I've never spoken or written about my true part in this tragedy until now. No one has ever heard the truth about my harmful intentions and the consequences they unleashed. Maybe I'm writing this even now with a small selfish purpose to release some of the burden still weighing on me late in life. But I also like to think this story may prove to be a cautionary tale for others, a reminder of the beautiful things in our lives and how fragile they really are under the forceful shower of our human emotions. The end.